The Burgess Institute for Entrepreneurship and Innovation empowers students to learn through action by providing campus-wide programs, courses, and resources to test ideas, foster an entrepreneurial mindset, develop empathy, and create new ventures. Learn more at eship.msu.edu.
This episode of the Hatchcast is brought to you by the MSU Entrepreneurship Association. The MSU EA is a registered student organization open to all majors who are passionate about entrepreneurship. Find out more at msuea.org.
Hello, and welcome back to this week's event segment. I'm Tiana, the communications intern, and I'm here to let you know all about the Burgess and entrepreneurship events happening this week. Burgess New Venture Challenge applications close on Monday, February 1st at midnight. Students will compete for up to $40,000 in prizes, so you don't want to miss out. Find out more on eship.msu.edu/Burgess New Venture Challenge. Don't forget to tune in to our next Innovate State with Rob and Kenny, president of Motor City Women and Audio Engineers of Detroit, on Wednesday, February 10th at 6 p.m. EST. On February 24th, we will have Kobe Cartledge coming in for our second Innovate State conversation in February. Kobe Cartledge is the lead business designer at New Ventures and Accelerators at Target.
We also have today, it is right now Friday, January 29th. Today is the last day to register and submit your idea for East Lansing Startup Weekend. Go ahead, please. You have until midnight tonight to register and submit your idea. And then next weekend, everybody gathers for 30 hours of Startup Weekend startup building. You can go to eship.msu.edu/EL Startup Weekend.
Also, to all of our listeners, our highly acclaimed show, The Mindset, our little segment that we do at the end of episodes, coming back this semester. What's that looking like, Aaron? Is it every other week we have an episode of The Mindset?
Yep, every other week. No matter what, The Mindset is coming.
All right, well, you heard it here first.
That's right.
Enjoy the show and enjoy The Mindset after.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. My name is Chris Sell, and I'm the Director of Alumni and Entrepreneur Engagement here at Michigan State. I'm in my, obviously, premium office space here in the basement of my household in East Lansing, Michigan. I know that we've got participants from far and wide East Lansing, globally, across the country, across the state. So welcome, everyone, to our first Innovate State of the 2021 year and of the spring semester here at MSU. Before I get to introducing my colleague and tonight's moderator, who will be also introducing our esteemed alumni guest tonight, I just want to share a few upcoming reminders for our programs within the purview of the Burgess Institute that I believe folks watching tonight might have a keen interest in. And that includes, of course, our next Innovate State. So as you might recall, Innovate State is indeed our fireside chat speaker series hosted by the Burgess Institute in collaboration with and support from the MSU Alumni Office, the MSU Foundation, Spartan Innovations. And so thanks to all of them for helping us bring this together. And Innovate State happens typically throughout the semester. And we typically find a rhythm every few weeks. We'll host a new speaker. And so sure enough, in a couple weeks on Wednesday, February 10th, we're going to be featuring Robin Kinney, founder at Motor City Women, who is just an extraordinary Spartan, who will be talking about her story in Detroit and lifting up fellow podcasters and AV folks over there. So look forward to that. Registration is already live for that program. And again, Innovate State is free to register for and attend. In addition to that, for those of you on tonight's event who are students at Michigan State, do not forget that we've got some really cool flagship programs coming up that can count as high impact experiences if you're a student in the academic minor for entrepreneurship, or certainly looking to get some investment and some cash for your respective startup or venture. We have coming up February 1st is the deadline for students wishing to apply and be considered for the Burgess New Venture Challenge, which is our annual student business model competition in Michigan State. So again, that deadline is February 1st. Do not forget, get your materials there, and you can find everything you need at eship.msu.edu. We also have our next startup weekend at Michigan State taking place on February 5th and 6th. For those of you wondering what that is a phenomenal program that follows the curriculum from Techstars that essentially allows students to come together virtually this spring, of course, and coalesce around different ideas, innovative, fun, unique, form teams, and within 36 hours, your team is pitching a business venture in front of a panel of judges for prizes and resources from the Burgess Institute. So the next one's coming up February 5th and 6th. If you're an alumnus and you're looking to get involved, unfortunately, we don't need you for February because we've got so many Spartans already volunteering to help out with that. But we still do need mentors for our April program. And so if you're thinking you'd like to give an hour or two of your time, which is all it takes, we would love to have your involvement for that program where you get a chance to virtually coach and mentor our students who are involved in that program. I think that's about it. The only thing I'll say here is you'll notice the chat feature is turned off, but the Q&A feature is turned on. And so you are allowed to kind of enter questions there, and myself and my colleagues here at the Burgess Institute will be monitoring that and trying to give a voice to those that have questions for Julian this evening. And if you are a student at Michigan State, you will be receiving tonight a survey from us that asks you to give feedback about tonight's program. It will be phenomenal, so you will be inspired to give that feedback. It only takes a minute or two, and we really, really, really need your constructive feedback to help continue making Innovate State a stellar program. And in fact, we've been able to build it out so that if you are enrolled in eShip 190 this semester, in order to get credit for participating in tonight's program, you have to complete that survey. And so you can actually indicate your enrollment in eShip 190 at the end of that survey if you are indeed one of those students. So be on the lookout for that. You'll probably be receiving that in your inbox before tonight's event is over. And we'll give you about a week or so to submit your response. It's super fast, but super valuable. So thanks in advance for your cooperation in that regard. I think that's about it. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my colleague, Aaron Richard, storyteller, communication manager for the Burgess Institute, who will be moderating tonight's conversation with our esteemed Spartan guests. So Aaron, take it away.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's such a pleasure to be here tonight. Last year, if you were part of the Innovate State crowd, you'll notice that I had done most of the Innovate State moderating, but this year we mixed it up a little bit. So this is my first one back in the seat, and it's just an honor. So thank you, and please forgive me if I'm a little bit rusty, but I am so glad to welcome Julian Posada to the Innovate State stage here. Julian is the founder and president of LiftUp Enterprises, a for-profit company with a social good mission, which is to lift up and harness the talents and ambitions of underemployed Chicagoans. Julian is a community leader, a serial entrepreneur, a Michigan native, like right here in East Lansing. And he also happens to be a proud Spartan. So again, Julian, welcome to Innovate State. It is such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to take a second just to prepare folks. Tonight, I have broken our questions into three distinct sections, and the sections are broken into the journey, not the destination, to profit or not to profit. That is the question, isn't it? And then shake, shook, shaken. Why 2021 needs entrepreneurs. So, Julian, welcome.
Thank you. No, first, thank you to Aubrey, who is behind the scenes, who, if you haven't seen her, and to you, Aaron and Chris, for the opportunity. It was a little, I think when we started thinking about this way back in September, I don't know if we knew where the world was going to be, and but happy to be here on a snowy Chicago early evening. And so thank you.
Section 1, it's the journey, not the destination. I think we hear that a lot. So I don't want to make any assumptions. Julian, if you could just very briefly give our audience a heads up and let them know in under a minute, can you give our audience a sense of what it is you do and what LiftUp Enterprises does?
Sure. And it is a long journey. So I would say it's, I'm on a path to try to figure out a way to create a stabilization path for the working poor. And it's a big, lofty goal. And so in a nutshell, I'm creating companies that are run based on dignity, that are creating pathways for people to work themselves out of the situation they're in, and to get to a higher income and a better position where they can have more opportunities for mobility. So we run 5 companies, which we all started, literally I started 3 years ago, and we're on a very fast clip to get to be profitable. And so we manage a double bottom line, actually a triple bottom line, but a double bottom line in the sense of I'm being held accountable on the financial side as well as on the impact side.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to go back a little bit. I'm going to rewind us. So you grew up in East Lansing.
Yep.
Did you grow up in an entrepreneurial family?
No, I actually got to Michigan State because my high school counselor said, listen, I think you should go to college, because my parents, my dad was a neurosurgeon and my mom learned English literally listening to WKAR in East Lansing and watching Sesame Street with us. And so I got to Michigan State literally, I don't know how, but I got there, no entrepreneurs, more like, you got to go to college for 20 years and then you can start your profession. So none whatsoever. But I think what I did get was a deep and brutal assessment of privilege. And so that, and what that means and how that should drive, at least has driven my life to figure out how privileged I am and everything, just the fact that I could go to Michigan State, but not entrepreneurial in any way, shape, or form. Yeah.
So what did you study at MSU?
I mean, I did food systems and agriculture, and I did that because, when you have parents that were born in Colombia, I think there was a huge push to understand how agriculture moves, right? And some of my professors were fantastic. I don't remember one specifically who was very frustrated with us because we were all goofing around, and he said, you know how much power, he basically got up and said, I have a lot of power in Nigeria. He's like, I have more power than the military. And we sat there and thought, and he basically walked us through how food systems basically control a lot. And it was eye-opening to understand that if you have a deep understanding of economics, but at the same time understand how food works one way or another, it was very powerful. So that, I think, was a tipping point for me to understand, like, there's a lot of business stuff that if I could focus understanding how that affects food, it could be pretty powerful. But I didn't get that until my senior year to truly understand how powerful agriculture is, and economics and politics and all these other issues that I now use almost every day.
So, I mean, working with students on a daily basis, something that we often hear asked is like, well, how does this apply to my degree and what I'm going to do in my profession? I think that students think that, I think many of us think that the path that we take throughout life is fairly linear, right? It's point A to point B to point C all the way to Z, and then you're done. And this also, I think, it gives a sense of, for some, a fierce dedication to one's field of study and siloing of thought. It automatically equates to a future success in said stated field. Would you agree with that sentiment?
No. I think there's part of that. I think that, I think my path, being at Michigan State, academically, I was an okay student. I mean, I worked hard. I think that most of my peers or friends would say, like, Julian, you were just very hyper, running around, getting involved in a lot of stuff on campus, but that your pathway, I think the grounding of just being able to execute and understand that academics are very important, and that grounding. And again, I go back to economics. I never took an accounting class and then I had to go to Kellogg, and it was like, Jesus, that was a big shift for me. But knowing a foundation about how the world works through economics is a big baseline. So in that sense, yes, I think that the core aspects of your undergrad, it might not be pertinent right away, but I still come back to how these different systems work to move an agenda forward. And that's my personal path. Like I have to have a big picture about, poverty is not a small topic, right? So, but entrepreneurially, it's a whole process.
Do you want to talk about that for a second? What do you think?
I mean, look, if anyone has seen my profile or if any of, folks that I know are watching, I have probably a very eclectic background. I've run sports teams, media companies, but I think it comes down to 4 or 5 core, core kind of operational things, right? Like I will outwork most people, right? So I think it's an incredibly hard work ethic. It's also, understanding that the balance between my EQ and IQ is what makes me a good leader, right? And so, and that pathway is applicable anywhere, right? So I, I always start, tell people, look, people quit people. So you got to focus on you got to be smart. Like I got to understand finance, right? I do now. I run these companies, but the EQ and the IQ balance, I think has made me a pretty successful entrepreneur. And I'm not afraid. I think that's the other part. Like, I don't know, like, I could keep going, what's worst case scenario? And worst case scenario is, I got to go find a job, but I don't have a fear of failure. And actually push my staff to fail all the time. And, I've had people cry like, Julian, I screwed that up. I'm like, yeah, okay, but move on. Let's keep going. So the, basic principles like that for me have been very powerful.
By the way, if I look away, it's just because I'm jotting notes, because there's so many. I was lucky enough to do a pre-interview with you, and we had an amazing conversation, and there's so many rabbit holes we could go down. But how is it collaborating with others? We've got a question here. I'm gonna see if we can answer one off the gate. So, how is it collaborating with others? Is it always a smooth process? How do you handle difficult situations when collaborating?
I think if you don't have tension, I don't know how you're collaborating. I think you're just going along with the group, So I think that collaboration is one where you have to push ebb and flow. You got to understand. For me, I try to always think about the other person's self-interest. Like what's driving that person, And if I understand that person's self-interest, I'm going to be more understood. And so having that inner dialogue with myself about, okay, I'm collaborating, and again, I have it a little hard because I'm trying to collaborate between city officials who are trying to get reelected, business professionals who don't really care about, yeah, that's okay, you're doing this good stuff, but just give me my money and like give me a good price. And then I have academics who are saying, well, let me understand the piece of it, and getting all 3 of them in a room. I am much better now at laser focus on collaboration is difficult, but it is an ebb and flow of really trying to get everyone to get alignment, right? And so I think what you and I talked about is alignment creates momentum, and focusing on getting alignment is critical. And I tell my staff that that's what we're working on. How do we get alignment? And not everyone's going to like it. There's different pace and different cadence to these things, but collaboration is one where it is a give and take all the time. So I don't know if I answered the person's question.
No, I think that does answer. I think that answers the question, and I feel like there's a through line here, because I want to follow up with this question, which is, it feels like agriculture, to study ag. You're looking at a lot of intersectionality. You're looking at how economics blends with food. You're looking at how people in migration pattern, and like there's a layer of complexity across everything. And so I feel like that studying the field that you studied, it automatically has a kind of entrepreneurial pathway laid out for you. Do you feel like that ag sort of prepared you to have an entrepreneurial mindset?
I think what it did is two things. I think it gives you perspective. Like you can't sit with what's been going on around our planet for the last, I don't know, we'll get to 21, but I don't think you can. I think what the ag school gives you is perspective that you're a very small player, and to really affect change, you got to have that ability to say, okay, I got to take on big structure stuff, but I also got to be, my world's got to get really small to be able to affect change. And so, I think the one thing I take away from it after being gone so long is, when you have a professor that might not be able to speak English that well, and if you stop for a moment, I wish I did, to ask, why are you here? I mean, Michigan State has an amazing agriculture program where you have some of the best minds that come to that university because of the way you look at how you feed the world, right? And there isn't a problem right now that, I don't think crosses somehow the food chain, right? Everything is going to be affected by that, and having perspective. So being how do you break through that clutter? Like, if, what I'm working on in terms of poverty, a big issue for poverty is food insecurity, right?
Yeah.
Like we're dealing with it right now. How do you create opportunities for people to relieve the stress of food insecurity when you're living paycheck to paycheck? That's a tough thing to do when we know from our own employees that they drink Dunkin' Donuts to suppress their hunger. They don't want to tell you, but they only eat one and a half times a day. And in Chicago, that's tough, right? So
Yeah.
you see huge 2 liters of coffee, and it's bad. They know it's bad, but they're doing it for another reason. And so slowing down and understanding. So food affects my workers, affects the business and how I run it. It affects how fast I can move forward. And, I don't take that for granted. We live in a country where there's so much, but making sure the utility of food is really important, and then go down to the kids and all the other stuff. So the perspective I think that ag gives you is incredibly powerful if you slow down enough to think about it.
So something that you just said sort of leads into you were talking about focusing to solve a problem. And I think that's what every entrepreneur tries to do, is to, okay, this is what the market needs. This is what this is a solution for that, and I'm going to push that out to the market. How can you talk about your philosophy on problem solving and how that leads to serial entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that, right now I'm calm, but most of my friends would say, oh my God, Julian, you keep running at a high pace. But I think that the simplification of the problem to just narrow it down to its essence of, marketplace or whatever it is, has forced me that, all of these problems have a bigger issue, and just relentless prioritization. I think that is what I've gotten good at. I've put myself into so many situations that I'm so overwhelmed. Like, you asked me, hey, Julian, how do you serve on 5 boards of directors while running 5 companies? And to the outside, oh my God, it's so much. And really, I'm just uber focused on prioritization every day. And where do I get the biggest benefit for the effort I'm going to put in, where I'm going to get the biggest benefit? And I really do that now just constantly. I think COVID for me is driving my staff crazy, because I am more productive now because I don't have staff to point the finger at or sit in meetings and waste time. Like I'm on Zoom calls or just pushing hard. So, but I think that relentless prioritization of what am I going to do today, and is at the highest value of my time, leaves open, Aaron, time to be able to just sit with human beings and give them time. And I think I learned that while running the Chicago Fire. Players were always, running around, going from training to training, and then, being able to, yes, you're the president, but then stopping and saying, these are also human beings. And I think that, for the players, they were very appreciative that, oh my God, the president's sitting down with me and giving me 15 minutes to talk about life issues, because they're just athletes, right? And
Right.
And I'd always make them espresso. I had a little espresso machine in my office, so they liked coming in my office.
So, I mean, if you look at LiftUp,
Yeah.
what I mean, 1.2 million Chicagoans living,
Yeah.
at or near the poverty line. And I'm sure because of COVID, that exploded.
Yeah.
What problem do you believe in your heart of hearts LiftUp Enterprises is helping to solve?
I think, it's helping give hope. I mean, I know it's a corny word, but
No.
I am never going to be the biggest cleaning, landscaping, painting company, or even looking at some of the other verticals we're looking at within the healthcare space or even the food space. Like we got a call on Friday to look at addressing ghost kitchens, because some people say that's a new form of slavery, is the ghost kitchens.
What is that? What can you?
Just ghost kitchens are simply like, for any of you who are listening who, like to get that prepackaged salad from 7-Eleven or wherever, someone's putting that thing together at night in a 50-degree, cold pressed room. And with restaurants down right now, a lot of people are just like giving up the kitchens. And so that work staff in the past would have supervision. They'd be regulated, proper places to operate. But now a lot of that work is happening in the middle of the night, and there's a huge opportunity for mismanagement and other stuff. And it's going to be $1 trillion business. And so
Wow.
We got asked to think about, can your model of stabilization be applied to, basically people that are cutting vegetables and putting them into boxes, or, all this other piece. And we know it can. And so, where I feel is that we're working really hard to create a model that can be replicable, that can be expanded beyond Chicago. Like it's the work I'm doing is worth more than what I'm doing. It's the intellectual property that I'm building to help small, medium-sized businesses retain their employees is pretty powerful.
Yes.
The model that we're building for city and state governments to say, hey, here's a methodology. If you do this stuff, you potentially could, you're actually helping create a more inclusive and a more livable place, right? And then to the business side, what I'm saying is, look, you can invest in what I'm doing, and if it's profitable and it's good, I can expand it, and you're going to get your money back and then something on top of it. But we're creating businesses that also have an incredibly strong, defendable position, right? And a competitive advantage in a space that is usually known for high turnover, low barriers to entry, and low medium margins. But the last time I checked ABM, which is an $800 million cleaning company, they're doing fine. I mean, they're crushing, even through COVID, right? So I don't want to be that size. I want to have a different, my view is different. But those are all very profitable companies. And if you can do that and create pathways for my managers are all going to get bonuses if we hit our numbers, but they got 2 numbers to hit. And they got a profit margin number to hit, and they have a social impact number to hit, right? And those 2 get me a company that's got low turnover, high potential for people to grow, and in industries that are usually been, I would say marginalized. I mean, you got workers that are cleaning toilets and or mowing grass, right? So it's not like COVID has actually helped, right? It's put a little bit more pizzazz into those jobs and people respect them a little bit more, but not much,
right.
And so how do you grow that, and how do you disrupt a model that is usually looking at human beings as disposable?
And that's ubiquitous.
That's the short answer of what I'm doing.
Well, and so Ellie Timmons, she asked a fantastic question, which is, why did you choose this sector of work? And I think that's an honest question.
No, it's a great, and the answer you might not like. It's because I launched these as the CEO. I was a COO of a $15 million nonprofit. So entrepreneurially, over a weekend, I was struggling with, this is not how I'm going to be able to take my kids and snowboarding or go with my friends snowboarding. Like I don't want to be the CEO of a nonprofit, right? I've run now bigger companies. And so I just sat and I said, I got to figure out a way to solve a business problem that's also a social need. So the reason I started building services companies is because I literally asked my accountant, give me 3 months of invoices. And I went home and I formalized my supply chain. I literally looked, who do we pay? Anybody we pay have these kind of characteristics. And then 2 weeks later, without telling anybody, as the COO, I have the power. I said, let's just launch some businesses. So I literally went myself and started 3 companies, called them Do Right and LiftUp, and incorporated them. And then I told my bosses, and I go, oh, by the way, I'm just trying these experiments. So if you ask me to do it again, yeah, I wouldn't start these. I would start other things. But what I did, what I was able to do now in hindsight is, if you can do it with these really hard businesses to grow, and we're doing it, we're doubling the size of the company every year.
Wow.
Then you can do it in other places as well, right? And that's why, now we're about to launch a graphic wrapping company, which is, putting the logos on cars. But, we got a deal potentially to go do if anyone's on the call from California, to rewrap 700 vehicles. The Frontier Communications Company, they have to rewrap all their vehicles. Okay, well, that could probably create 4 full-time jobs for someone could make between $40,000 and $50,000 a year.
That's amazing. That can be that's life-changing.
That's life-changing.
Because there's a question here that I think segues nicely into the next section of this. So, can we talk about conscientiousness in entrepreneurship?
Sure. How you want
to? I think the question is, why did you decide for LiftUp to be a for-profit company instead of a nonprofit?
Oh, it's a simple question. It's easy to do the nonprofit. And so a little background, I've been looking at social enterprise for a long time, and I've been working in nonprofits and for-profits. And, I've been serving on boards for 25 plus years, almost 30 years, and I've been on both sides, and I've been able to be very fortunate to run some for-profit companies. But I think that the nonprofit angle is good, but my experience has been social enterprises usually are very hard to scale and to replicate, because you need a lot more capital. And so, although I know all the big players in the foundation world, from Ford on MacArthur, you name them, they don't have a lot of, and there's not a lot of models that can grow from a nonprofit's perspective. There are some, but when you look at the balance sheets, there are a lot of heavy in real estate, and the funding comes through these things called PRI. And so I felt that, no good deed goes unpunished. I wanted to do it the harder way, which was, if I can do this on the for-profit side, the bigger change is me getting ABM. And I'll give you a real example from the city perspective. Right now, if you are making under $20 an hour in Chicago, you are functionally poor. 99% of cleaning, landscaping companies pay every 2 weeks. So if you make under $20 an hour, you have liquidity issues. There is no way you are not living paycheck to paycheck. So this is not a brilliant idea by me. I pay once a week, right? So just one thing I'm doing, I'm already gaining more traction, lower turnover, and getting people in. The amount of companies that actually do that is so low, right? I can affect more change by being a for-profit, because now they look at me as a competitor, right? Yep. If the city of Chicago or any big city gave 1 or 2 points to any RFP that came to get city business, this is a $6 billion company, is the city of Chicago, $6 billion, right? 1 point on an RFP, if you have hourly workers and you pay them once a week, I guarantee you the impact that would have on human beings who are getting hourly wages would be huge. No one's doing it, because it takes the will of the city. That's why I fight all the time, in a good way, with my friends who run the city. But as a for-profit, I can start creating change, and we're already seeing it, right? We're seeing where we are taking employees from other companies and giving them a better job in the same job, right? And another example of that is, I think in the nonprofit, it's not that you don't have the acumen and you don't have the rigor, but I have the self-imposed pressure of, this thing's got to be profitable. Like, I can't keep going back to a well. And I've been along the nonprofit enough where, for perspective, the nonprofit is it's not rational. It's not a rational ecosystem. Aaron loves poodles. I like German Shepherds, and Chris over there, he likes, golden retrievers. We're all going to start 3 nonprofits to help dogs. God forbid we all work together, right? But the funder is only one. So you don't have the market demands. So I'd rather fight harder and do the road less traveled, was be a for-profit and leverage that structure, right? So I like the corporate structure because it forces me to be better. And by the way, we are about to launch a nonprofit on the side, so I'm going to have both. I have a for-profit and a nonprofit. So it's
glutton for punishment.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, Gerald here asks, what are some of the primary issues of running a nonprofit organization?
I mean, salaries, let's put it this way. I mean, I'm getting the best talent because I'm paying corporate wages, right? So in nonprofits, it's hard to give bonus structures. That's not a normal practice. Like, oh, no, you're doing God's work. You're working in a nonprofit. I'm like, no. I want to be able to say, you hit those revenue numbers, and at the same time you hit those turnover numbers, I know you're doing good. You should be compensated. Right. Yep. So I think nonprofit, it's not that you can't make six-figure salaries. They're not that normal. And there is a stigma with, oh, well, we got to do good. And I think the other thing for me is, I think it's coming in the next 10 years. Not most nonprofits aren't run by data and insights. They're run by emotion, and they're run by need. And I don't play that game. I mean, I can be, bleeding heart and like cry and all that stuff. But if I can create data and insights and drive policy and drive strategy based on data and information, just like corporations do for gross margin, I'm going to have a pretty kick-ass for-profit nonprofit. And that's going to be hard to replicate. And that's what people get excited about, is that I'm not placing my value set on what's important to my employee to stabilize. I'm using the data to tell me, hey, working on food insecurity is a little bit more important than giving them a transportation voucher. Like, which one is more important? Right now, everyone, because they are siloed and they have their own self-interest, is saying, well, transportation is critical. Yes, transportation is critical to the working poor, just as food is, just as healthcare is, just as education attainment, and go down the list. Which one is more important? And which one do you prioritize? If I do my job right, I'll have predictive analytics that can go to any company and say, hey, you have a $20 employee. I think this will work faster to get them to be happier with their job than this, and this. How much is that worth to McDonald's or big food companies? A lot of money. And I'm incubating that within a landscaping business. It's not a landscaping business. I'm looking at data and IP to drive strategy. It's agnostic. So my model is agnostic to the business line. I mean, we're looking at food kitchens. I'm looking at, telehealth. How can my workers who work a shift cleaning then do, telehealth at night, because they can make $22 an hour, but they still have a shift. They're doing $15.50 for cleaning. That is creative. It is not easy, right? But we're getting there.
Now, do you invest in e-commerce?
No, not yet. I haven't gotten there yet. I mean, no. I mean, we don't sell anything, and I think that's a whole other animal. Like, wow, I can't even think about doing that right now. Ooh, I got enough problems. I'm just making sure it snows again so I can make more money with with our snow removal teams, and make more money today and tomorrow.
So today, I think something that gets a little under my skin. Today we see many, I'm going to call them OG brands, right? They pivot to social good, and I'm going to put social good in air quotes, though it might drive people nuts. And a return to corporate ethics. So maybe I'm just a cynic, but those pivots feel more like PR moves than authentic action. What is social good through the lens of an entrepreneur?
I mean, that's, look, that's a very personal question, because I think it depends where we come from and how, how hard you want to work at it. Because I have people that say that I have a company and I'm employing people, I'm doing social good. I mean, maybe not my approach to it, but hey, and there is value to that. Look, through COVID, I haven't shut down, and I've given people my job. I'm doing a social good because I'm not firing them. I agree. I think that it's a range of how much, where you want to go. I think that the B Corps, and the other ones are starting to put a little bit more rigor on, hey, listen, you can't kind of own that mantle, because we're going to get you a little deeper. But I think that, you have a responsibility as a leader to think about, what impact do you want? What I'm very excited about in terms of this next generation is that purpose is, and I've been very blessed to, meet some of the other alumni from MSU, but there's a deep drive of having purpose in your life and purpose in where you work and purpose in your boss and all those other things. And that, for me, I think is going to drive what social impact is, because I think the employee base, especially if you're a college graduate or other, you're going to demand that of where you work, and you can't be successful. No one's going to tell you, oh my God, no, I just want average people to work for my company, right? Like no one's going to say that. I think, more and more people are going to be, driven by employers who embrace their purpose and their passions, and employees that can do that, So that's what I'm looking forward to. But I think it's a very personal one. I'm trying to really push. My lens is, if my venture capital friends who are, I'm obviously center left, if not moderate left. I have friends who are moderate right, and I'm like, can you see it? Can you make a lot of money in what I'm doing? At first, they're like, no, Julian. Now, they're like, well, I kind of like that tech thing you're thinking about. And like, do you think you can really get numbers on that? I'm like, oh, how much value is that to, I have friends that are in private equity who are, look at buying these big companies. And I'm like, how much is it worth what I'm doing? And he's like, well, Julian, if you actually get that done by 23, 24, that can be a competitive advantage of how we evaluate companies. How much is that worth? A lot. So when I feel I can cut through the hardcore capitalist, I know I'm getting to a point where the model is agnostic to party. It's really just doing, and it just happens to do a good, right? You're actually helping people create stability in their lives. I mean, no one's going to say no to that. They just don't know how to do it, right? And This is hard work. I could make a lot more money going to work for private equity guys.
Right.
Like, I know how to run companies. I've done that. So that's the other part about doing a for-profit. If you can demonstrate that folks like me can make a good living with what I've been able to do and show pathways, then there are other folks who are probably maybe on the call saying, Jesus Christ, I'd always want to, travel. I can't on a nonprofit salary. Well, my goal is that here are ways in which you can do what I'm doing. I don't care. Go start it in Mississippi, go start it in New Jersey. I don't care. But you can have the potential of figuring out a way to hit your financial aspirations, and at the same time you're doing good, right? That's nice.
So can you talk a little bit, so building ethics or values can be harder, perhaps even more expensive, especially for lean startups, or it can be perceived as such. How do entrepreneurs embed values and ethical activities without busting the bottom line? Is that possible?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think, look, you have to push. But I think that, at least on the financial side, look, you can always be unethical. I think that, and ethics is something that, is in, some say it's in the eyes of the beholder, like what's really wrong with that, right? And so, but I think that, at least on the financial side, what you're seeing more and more, right? I mean, look at what Biden just, put into place today, and what you see, big cities and or other folks trying to do is saying, look, equity and inclusion are more ethical ways of trying to figure out a way to get people engaged. We're going to reward that, right? You see, and so that's not really an ethical thing, but it's more of a right thing to do, and potentially for me, I think it's a moral obligation for you to try to be more inclusive and look at equity as part of what you do. It's not for everybody, but I don't think today, but I think it's going to be very difficult in 10 to 15 years for publicly traded companies to not, when you see it at the board level already, but I think that the transparency, even if the cancel culture dies down a little bit, you're still going to see more rigor on transparency, and how you make decisions and how you grow your company, I think is going to be put into check. I think that the other reason I try to make this a private company is that we'll get it where it hurts. Like we are disproportionately having a better pipeline at recruiting talent, right? And at the end of the day, what we saw pre-COVID was it was a really tight tight job market, people market, right? For services. I got a waiting list of people that are working in jobs that like, hey, do you have any more openings? So I will become, by next year, the employer of choice to clean toilets and to mow lawns. And that already is going to create panic for my competitors. So what my competitors might say is like, how did he do that? Well, pay your people once a week. Try to create an employee-sponsored, company-sponsored employee loan fund so your employees don't go to check cashing places where they're going to get hit 26% interest daily, And those are great. Hey, take it. Go ahead. You still have to execute it.
Right.
And you still have to have the mindset. And that's where I'm like really driving harder and harder and harder to be on the cutting edge, right? And that fail fast mentality, I have a fail fast mentality and invest a little and learn a lot mentality. So, every one of my, employees has like, I kid you not, that like you have an expense account. Like go spend money and just tell me you failed or tell me you did something, but don't embarrass me or the company. Make sure you're trying to move our vision forward. But how much is $500 in $1 million company? It's
Right.
not material, but if the innovation and the insight comes, so I'm building, a team of people that are entrepreneurs. My accountant, who you don't think is entrepreneurial, is coming up with stuff like, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And I'll reward him like, hey, here's $25, go do something. But he's trying to be very innovative on how he uses invoices and accounts payable and accounts receivable to drive, different things that I think are valuable to us. So it'll take time, but look, I'm still a startup.
And you've got time.
Yeah.
And you've, so what I've loved in the 44 minutes that we've been talking, that you've said failure on a number of occasions, and that failure has a relationship to learning lessons, and that you shouldn't fear it. Is that a correct characterization?
Oh yeah, I just look, yes. I think that I think failure is the strongest path to success. I don't think that there is a way in which you can get there, even if you're not an entrepreneur. Like, I don't know how many times I did not know what I was doing when I ran a newspaper, and I still figured out a way to like, okay, that's, again, not going to embarrass my boss or, unethical in any way, shape, or form, but I think we really need to push. And for perspective people, like I ran a very liberal leaning pro-immigrant newspaper, and my parent company was the Chicago Tribune, which is as conservative as it gets. On top of that, my bosses could not read the paper. So I would give them the paper every day and they're like, like I can't read it. I'm like, okay, I'm the publisher, so let me do what I want. But what they did see was revenue go up, readership was strongest in the entire portfolio of all their businesses, and our margin kept growing. And so although it was a $15 million business, we were making 26% profit margin.
Wow.
On half the salary that the other newspapers were running, and we were running pretty hardcore stuff, right? So you got to have also faith a little bit, and but yeah, I think failure, you have to attempt. I'm just not afraid to attempt. I mean, look, it's not for the faint-hearted. I say that all the time to my staff, and I have advisors who really surround me with people that are much faster at financial acumen, because that's just not, I'm good at it. I'm okay at it. Not good. I'm okay at it, but I got people that are much better. And so I've surrounded myself with my guardrails, right? Like if you look at my advisory board, half of them are private equity, venture finance guys. And what they do is they give me the guardrails. You can spend this much or this much. So whatever you can screw up all in there, right? And so I said, don't ask me any questions. Just how much can I lose, and they don't care how much I make. So I just have the bottom, and then I get close sometimes, but usually I find a way to make more money. And who doesn't want that?
Right.
All my investors do, and they're counting on it, by the way. They're counting that out of this crazy thing I started, I'm going to be one of the more innovative portfolio companies in a space that's not necessarily looked at it being, innovative.
Right.
Especially on the people side. I'm not saying I have better detergent or I got better equipment. I'm saying I'm building better people by working on what's important to them. And what's important to them is stability, flexible workspace, You pay once a week. We figure out a way to help their kids. Like we're really pushing some pretty interesting pathways. And by the way, I have my interns doing that from the University of Chicago. Wow. So they're having fun. They're working their ass off. No, excuse my language, but
I think we can forgive that. That's it.
Yep.
So a question that I feel ties in, do you recommend a revolving door of employees, or do you try to keep them as long-term, and why?
So if you ask me about the population I'm working, I would love to have good turnover, right? Can
you define that? Can you put
so good turnover for me is, look, I'll give her name. Josefa she's been a cleaner for 20 years, and Josefa has 2 kids, and she's making $15.50 an hour. She's making 15. Now she's making $15.50. And sadly for her, $18 is an aspirational dollar amount. And so just let that sink in for a second, right? And it would be amazing if I can get her to say, she's at $18 today. We teach her other skills and we get her to 20 to 25, and she's worked her way out of cleaning because she's aspired to do something different. It's more painful for the business. But I think that's part of the model. Part of my model is, hey, if I could create a system that brings people in and over 2 to 3 years gets them to have a higher wage growth, we fixed their credit, we worked on some of their legal issues, we've helped stabilize and move them on. My instinct tells me any other innovative companies that we want to launch, because I created a holding company, more than likely they might incubate even within me, like within the structure that we created, because I have a solid back office, solid marketing, and solid, management staff. But yeah, we want good turnover because that's part of a social. I don't want people stuck in their jobs forever, especially the jobs I have. That's really hard to do. So I'm hoping, we haven't set a percentage. I'm not a glutton for punishment. I haven't said, hey, 20% of my staff I want to work out of their jobs, but I want to get there, because then I'm doing my job. I'm working people to the poverty line or above it, where then they can make their decisions, right?
So it's about empowerment, and I'm sure that Josefa is able to say, hey, I have other talented folks that I know who you should be pulling into your pipeline.
Yeah. It's more basic than that. It's, hey, I have other people that like the fact that you pay once a week.
There you go.
Yeah, it's really basic right now. It's like the bar for the human beings that I'm working with is very low right now, and COVID has wreaked havoc. Like, look, I've had 50% of my company in one way, shape, or form has been affected by COVID, right? So it's very hard. And these are people that are not asking for handouts, right? So, I'm working with a population that's very proud that, they want to just go to work. They don't want handouts. They're kind of like, this is what I've gotten, si Dios quiere, God willing, this is where I'm at, and I got to push them through, and it's going to take a long time, because some will never push through, right? Josefa might not, if I get her at $18 an hour, she might be, oh my God, I made it. We can't impose like, hey, you should go code or you should go do this. That's the other thing I put in check all the time. Like, just because I think it's better if you do that stuff, stability is based on what they want. We have a woman who doesn't want more hours. She wants 1 hour underneath whatever she can get for Social Security, but she's one of our best workers. She's like, I don't want more hours. I know you want to give me more. I know I can do more, but I'm going to do an amazing job doing just this shift at this time. And I'm happy because her value and purpose in life is she takes care of her grandkids. That's amazing. That's all I care about. You're happy. She's poor. She has but she doesn't care. And that's really nice. That, and I get people that complain like, Julian, she's still part-time. I'm like, she wants to be part-time. And if you ever ask me why, and I told you, because she wants to raise grandkids so that, her siblings can have a better life because they're going to school at night. People usually get quiet real quick. I don't assume. So.
Poor and content is rich and rich enough, I believe, is the Shakespearean line. Really? There is a slew of amazing questions that are in here. I'm going to close out. I'm going to do my third section, and I'm going to turn it over to the audience who are blowing away the questions. So first, We just came out of a bitter year, and 2021 isn't necessarily feeling as, it's not necessarily all sunshine and rainbows. What gives you the most hope in 2021?
I mean, it's a tough one, right? Because this, I think, I think 2021, beyond COVID, I mean, we have a divided nation, and so I think what gives me hope, and and I say this with pause, is that we all understand that, we have a lot of differences, and what I'm very hopeful is that there's a lot of reflection, and that people don't take for granted things that they might have taken for granted, that your neighbor might look at the world very differently than you, and you might look at the world very differently than they do. But at the end of the day, a lot of people are suffering, and, not just COVID, but COVID, a bitter election, what's going on, especially I mean, just looking at East Lansing, right? Or Lansing, and around our country, that you have to have a little bit more empathy, right? So what I'm hoping, and it's hard, right? Because we have the fringes, right? But I'm hoping, and I see folks in the middle, who are, hey, I need to maybe have a little empathy, maybe, I'm uber liberal, but maybe I need to think, why is that person so conservative, right? And, or, we don't all raise our kids the same way, right? And that we have a little bit more patience with each other, and that there's more perspective, right? And so that's a tough one. But I am hopeful. I see people from both sides of the aisle on the political side come to the table, and they can get behind things that I'm doing because it's agnostic. Like, it's not that I'm preaching one thing or another. And so I think that it's going to be a good year that's going to be brutally painful at the same time. I think that, the Band-Aids have come off on a whole bunch of issues, but I think that I'm optimistic that there's going to be innovation that's going to come through. And you already start to see it. I mean, you see disruption in the food space dramatically. You see supply chains that are having to redo what they have to do. You see people changing habits. I mean, what is work now? What is office? How are people looking at that stuff? And so out of that, you're going to have some innovation that I think is going to be helpful. Work-life balance has a completely different meaning in 21 than it did in 19, right? Yeah. And so, what is education, right? I have a graduating senior who, what does freshman year look like? And it's going to be different. But I think it'll take a year of pain, but I think the 21 is going to be another learning year of recalibrating. But I'm optimistic, right? I'm constantly looking at the glass, half full, not empty.
I appreciate that. I'm going to turn this over because you are a wonderkind, and this has been fantastic. There's one question that's up here. Proliferation of mobile ownership in impoverished regions recently enabled track and trace technologies limiting counterfeiting. Do you have experience with technologies similar to or including IBM Food Trust? And how do you find the digital divide impacts innovation? Multifarious.
Yeah, that's fine. No, it's fine. Look, I have no experience in any of that stuff. Like, I'll be honest, the latest piece of technology I'm looking at is, how do I schedule, like very off the shelf stuff. And I don't have the money to just be blunt, like we're a startup, right? So no experience in that. And then the other one's, how does the digital divide?
Yeah. How does, go ahead. I think it's, how do you find the digital divide impacts innovation?
I mean, it impacts you because, yeah, there's a lot of people that don't get it. I think it's also, what segment you want to work on. Like I work with people that, their phone is their TV and, a whole bunch of other things. But the digital divide, I think at an education level, I think is tough. But I think, look, I've seen some amazing entrepreneurs, who it's nice to have technology, but technology in and of itself isn't the innovation, right? I think that it's a tool that you use. And I think if the brain and if the solution you're doing is breaking through, technology, from my perspective, has never hurt any of the entrepreneurs. I think if you're a tech-based entrepreneur because you want to, I want to go build a new app or something else, that's fine. I'm not that smart. I'm doing like very mundane, hard working with people, type stuff. But I don't see it. I see it's very sad, the digital divide in terms of education, but not entrepreneurism. I think
Right.
it breaks through.
Thank you. Gary asks, how does your company approach ensuring that all employees are knowledgeable about diversity and inclusion?
It starts with me, to be honest. I think it's we're small, we have 50 employees, right? I think it starts with me, and it starts with, the way I operate the company. I practice a lot of inclusive leadership practices and a lot of, really purposeful listening techniques that I do every day in staff meetings. And then it's about celebrating the differences that we have and a no tolerance on crap that, shouldn't be in the workplace. And then we haven't gotten there yet, but, I think as we get better, we'll have more cultural fluency in terms of understanding differences, with other, as we look at employing returning citizens, as we look at different populations. I think that, there's no way I cannot do that without having, D&I be a core part of what we do. But it's very difficult because I have immigrants, Spanish dominant right now, the majority of them, and then you have issues of class and all these other things. And so, but at least for now in our practice, I think it's my approach. I try to operate the company with humility, right, and dignity. Our operating principle is dignity. So that is a very hard thing to achieve, and that's why we picked that word, because it's that hard. I'm never going to do it in 1 week, in 1 year, 2 years.
No.
It's something that's a continuous challenge. And so I'm hoping that, we'll get a pass sometimes if we screw up, but that the spirit and the actions that we do are a inclusive culture and an inclusive organization.
How do you define dignity?
It's in the simplest is, walk in that person's shoes, or, like, how far can we go? What's your dignified approach? My accountant, how do we use dignity in accounting? It's a hard one, because for me, it's like, how do I want to be treated? And what I have, like the way I'm running the company, is that a dignified response? Would that be something you would want someone to do to you? Like even scheduling, like what's a dignified way to run a schedule? What's a dignified way to create benefits? Why don't you ask the customer, right? And our employees, and, how do we manage by that? So I think it's really spending the time to listen to my employees and then who you're trying to serve. And it's not easy. Right now we're running really hard. So like, let me just say, these concepts are awesome in theory, and we work really hard at trying to be very present and making decisions in the moment and being present about what we do. Overall, we've not, we're going to screw up, obviously, because that's my push. But I think the dignity for me is something where, how do I want to be treated? And is that good within the means that I got? I can't,
Right.
Dignity is like, oh my God, I'm going to buy you a new car. No, I can't. Like, I still have, things I gotta do. But I think that overall, it's how do you want to be treated and treat people the way, and and can we move farther than the normal decision that a normal company would do?
I love that. Armando asks, what are some major, and I feel like you've answered this in nuanced ways, but what are some of the major problems that you face in expanding your business?
It's time. I was asked, I think that for me, it's not capital, because I've been very fortunate to work really hard with people. I think it's time, and I think it's the will. It's the will for people to give the small guy a shot, but I'm just relentless. So I think it's just time, guys. We got enough stuff in the pipeline where if we have this conversation a year from now, I'm sure I've doubled the size of the company. I think it's time and talent. I would love to have, be able to pay more, get a couple more people on the payroll, right, that can help us grow. But, I also want to prove to people that running a tight ship, really tight on expenses, really focused on the right revenue, that's the model, right? That you're applying hardcore. Guys, I have a weekly gross margin check. Like, I'm not fun when it comes to our numbers. But I'm also just gave, told everyone today, look, it's snowing, no one going to the office today, because I got a couple single mothers, and I'm like, and they're like, "Oh, Julian, thank you, because I just plowed the snow," and as we talked about, heart attack snow because it's heavy and wet here. So that's dignity, right? Like that's how you
dignity.
do it. That's
I
the way
was
you
just
do it.
gonna say it all comes full circle.
But I'm not an easy boss. Let's just be clear. Like, I'll fire you on the spot. If you embarrass me or do something unethical, I have no problem. None.
Which is also dignity, because you're thinking about the company culture, and you're thinking about the people who work beside one another. That if you don't respect somebody who stands beside you, then that's not living up to dignity.
Yeah, I have the other side of a reputation is, Julian, you're the guy that comes in and you're the hatchet man. Like you come into the fire and you cut, 20% of the staff, and you get to the newspaper and you're the one that cuts. But usually people, so most of these people, when I have to let them go, most of them come back and say, Julian, I'd like to come work for you again, because they understand it's a business decision, and I usually come in to clean house. This is one where this is one I'm starting myself. So I hire people I want to work with.
I'm looking, I've got a couple here who's been waiting. So I think it's Dahi. I currently own my own general contracting company, and I am looking to double my profits this summer. The customers are not an issue. I am having trouble sourcing enough labor to complete jobs. What advice do you have for finding labor? Do you recommend having a revolving door of employees, or trying to keep employees long-term?
I mean, I don't know what contracting services, but I think you have to do long-term and find pathways for them, because my instinct tells me what we found, people jump ship for 20 cents on the dollar, right? Or 15 cents on the dollar. And so how do you prevent that? It's the intangible that makes the tangible useful. So that intangible, like how you treat them and showing them that they have pathways and really sitting down with them. And it's not easy for CEOs, but that's, again, my pace. I'll sit down with Josefa, and have a conversation with her, like, what's going to make you stay? And usually at first it's wage, because they're suffering from something different. And then you got to get to the root causes of that stuff. But look, the labor market's going to get tight and tight, even though you're going to have more people unemployed, and you're going to have this because people don't want to do some of these jobs. But what we have found, again, and why our turnover is low and why I have a pipeline is we're building a reputation based on, listening to my customer. I have two customers. I have the person who's paying the bills, and I have a customer who's my employee. I mean, we have an HR it's all about people. And you hear that from Salesforce or, big companies, IBM, it's all about people. Well, you go down to the really, really well-run service businesses and all that stuff, it's the same thing. It's just, you have to think very differently about how to solve that problem. And that's the essence of what I'm trying to do. I'm building a better mousetrap. It's the same mousetrap. I'm just trying to figure out a different way to do it. But it's not easy. And I think it takes a lot of time, and you have to make it, it is literally the most important thing you can do in your business. Because you're right, I don't have a problem. I mean, I have a problem with sales because I'm punching way above my weight. But I focused on people first. So now I have a pipeline.
I love that. How do you take income / pay employees when running a nonprofit? What is considered non-ethical to take back for yourself?
So I run a for-profit, and I have created a separate structure that's a nonprofit that we're about to launch. So I'm being paid completely out of a for-profit. But to answer your question, the IRS allows you to do 20%, right, of the stuff that you've raised money for in the nonprofit to pay yourself in the for-profit. I'm not going to take a penny, but I'm using money I'm going to be raising in the nonprofit to cover shared services like centralized marketing, centralized accounting. I'll do that. But a lot of nonprofits, do that.
And that really depends on the 501 distinction.
Yeah,
right?
The 501c3 and how you set up the, shared services agreements and arm length transactions and all this other legal crap that I've become very good at. But I could take up to 20, but I'm doing 0 personally.
we've got a question from Ellie. What has been your biggest problem you have faced when growing this business in particular? It seems as if politics would be a huge problem faced within your company because you are dealing with those who are well below the middle class.
No, that's not been the issue. I mean, I think they're grateful for the job. The biggest issue with this has been people not understanding. Like if you looked at the last question we just got, well, is it a for-profit, is it a nonprofit? I think, I had a billionaire who didn't give me any money, said, Julian, I know how to make a lot of money and I know how to give a lot of money away. I don't understand this. Like you can make money, but you're doing good and you can give me money back. Like I'm operating in a gray space, right? Where I'm saying I can do good and do well. You're going to give me money. I'm going to give you that money back in a little interest. And on the way, I'm going to create new jobs and stability. And that's a lot for people to understand. So the hardest part about this has been, you're not black and you're not white, but you're really growing a business. And that's been the hardest part. The hardest part has been, but you're really trying to thread the needle, aren't you? And I'm like, yes. And that's been the hardest. And that's why I'm grateful now that we're actually threading the needle, right? And that's why we're getting success, right? That's why we got capitalized, because they're like, okay, let's take a bet. And so I got Don, who, was the past CEO of McDonald's, who I knew him and his wife from a long time ago. They're like, let's take a risk on the entrepreneur, right? But the hardest part was convincing institutions who are used to doing it a certain way that, like, yeah, I don't really like that way. And they're very distinct. For profit, wait, you're just going to make money, right? You're going to maximize shareholder value. I'm like, no, not really. Wait, you're going to make money on this, the foundation? You mean you're going to make money? Yeah. And I'm going to pay myself well. And I'm going to make sure that everyone on my staff gets paid well, that we have a double bottom line. That's the hardest. Now you're getting more and more. And as I told you, Aaron, before, I have a big speech coming up. We're kicking off. I was asked to kick off on a panel, Impact Investing Week for Chicago through Impact Engine. And this is the big question, right? Like, okay, well, how, you're kind of this in-between thing. I'm like, yeah, but that in-between thing is why I feel over time I'll create a defendable position and I'm going to create enough profit, people. So it's not that I'm going to give it all back. No. I need to demonstrate that you can make a good living, doing good, doing well, so that the next CEO who might take my job, who's on this call, can say, oh, I want Julian's job. Great, come and get it, right? But you're going to make a nice salary. You're going to work your ass off, but you can make a nice salary. And you can reach your financial aspirations, right? And that's the difference. That's doing well and doing good.
I love this question. The question is, Julian, you just mentioned you would fire people if they embarrass you. What are the sort of stuff that could embarrass you? Just curious, because you seem like a person who is open to people who want to learn stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I'll give you some, I won't tell you their names, but I had people that, came in and, again, these weren't the social enterprises. So let's be clear. These were people who were working in some of the past companies I've run. And, they were disingenuous about how they made those sales, right? And when one of the newspapers, right? Like, and what they did is they basically, baited the small advertiser, right? When you run an immigrant newspaper, like, you're getting really little dollars, and they had oversold and basically led customers down a wrong path. And I fired her on the spot. I'm like, listen, you've just ruined our brand. That person feels that you shystered them. You think you got a nice check because you hit your commission check, but you didn't do it the right way. And I'd rather you would have told me I didn't make my numbers this month, but instead you decided to make a decision to oversell a customer, right? Who you couldn't deliver. You did it in the wrong way. And so you're gone. So, I mean, I don't think that's that hard. I mean, I don't know. I've also done it where, and again, I have a very open door policy. We had other people that, basically made decisions that impacted the rest of the team in ways that were very detrimental to the company, but very enriching for themselves. And that's not a culture I want. And so, I made them think about those decisions. And I said, is this what you want? And actually, I didn't have to fire them. They literally resigned the hour after we had the conversation, which I think was even harder for them than me firing them.
Yeah. And hopefully they've learned something in that
Yeah.
in that hour.
You hope. Some do, some don't. Some just will rinse and repeat, do the same thing in the next company and get away with it. But
Or lose another job.
or lose another job. Yeah.
What advice would you give someone hoping to pursue social issues while working in business?
I think, I said a little bit, I think finding, leaders that have that same rigor for work and for purpose, right? And so, and that's not easy. So I'm not going to say that's not easy, but I think it's, look for, it's not easy, but looking for CEOs that you feel, that he or she, have some of the same values you have. Look at where they spend their time. What boards of directors do they sit on? Are they leaders in those boards? And look at what decisions they've made and look at how they speak and what do they do. And if you can find, oh, wow, I'm relational to that person, hopefully that person is driving that behavior and they've routinized that stuff through the organizations they run. So hopefully you can kind of connect the dots. But I think it's always going to start with, is the people that you're going to go and spend a lot of time with, are they locked into a different view? And it might not be the company, it might be their personal, right? Like, hey, I know plenty of CEOs who would like, look, my company's not doing a lot of this stuff, but me personally, I value, and you see where they're spending the time, I value giving back this, and that. And if that's someone you can go work for, that's where I would start. I think there's going to be more and more people that are going to say, I'm doing socially good. And I think those models are going to keep continuing, or organizations that are driven by purpose. But I feel that it starts with, who are you going to work for? Right. And I think that drives a lot of the conversation, because you hope that you'll be able to meet with that person and get insights and get mentorship, right? Especially early on in your career, you need that mentorship. And so I think it's easy when you have someone that, wow, I like what they're doing. And you can, and these are non-business questions. Like my staff now ask me all the time, like, Julian, what boards are you on? How do you do this and that? Not to do anything with how I got gross margin on a cleaning company. It's more like, how do you do, what you do in terms of, being an empathetic leader, whatever, active listening, all this other jargon stuff that I had to learn.
Well, Julian, I'm getting flares because it looks like we're almost 1 minute away from being done. However,
yeah.
And I thank you everybody in the Q&A. I'm so this is the most questions I've seen pop through in any Innovate state. So this is amazing. We've gotten through 15 questions. I have one last one that I'd like to ask you.
Yeah.
What 3 books are you reading or have you read in the most recent that you would recommend to our audience right now?
I actually just recommended it to, I read it a while ago, but I think one of them is called, oh my God, The Goal, which is a book about process improvement. It's a half soap opera, but half process improvement about understanding how do you move things forward. So I think that's one. I think the other one that I just spent a little bit of time on, again, quoting for my friends was, Malcolm Gladwell's Blink, or the Tipping Point, not Blink, the Tipping Point. Because I think that's one where, like, don't get discouraged that everything's going to happen to you right away, right? Like it takes 10,000 hours. And so it's perspective, right? Like, you're going to get good, but you got to do it over and over and over again. Yeah. And other than those two, I mean, I don't think I've read, I just read a lot of Harvard Business Review stuff or, right now the paper, well, not the paper, but like, whatever comes on my thing. But yeah, those are the I think the 2 that really stick out, just because I was just asked the other day and I'm like, okay, I've read those probably 5 times, just to let the story sink in.
And forgive me, indulge me this one more question.
Yeah.
How are you taking care of yourself and dutifully tending to self-care in this challenging time?
Again, I'm one of those people that wake up really early. But I still play soccer out. I just played this last weekend in the snow. So like I play soccer 2 or 3 times a week, pretty competitively still. When I get time, I get to go snowboard with friends. And I do, like light yoga, not hot yoga, just very light stretching. And I cook a lot. pretty good cook. And as we talked about, Aaron, in the summer, I have a garden, and that keeps me busy. But I still play competitive soccer, and I'm out there with a lot of 30 somethings, even though I'm 50. So yeah, I'm pretty well balanced. It's a very good question, and I do think it's incredibly important. But I still work 10 hours a day, so.
Hey,
Really
as long
right.
as you're taking time out
Yeah.
and treating yourself well,
Yeah.
so that you can treat others well, I feel like
Yeah, I'll have
you'll
a beer as
succeed.
soon as we get off this. I'll have a scotch or a beer and relax, and then watch some TV, and then we'll see what happens tomorrow. Shovel snow again.
Please drink responsibly. Thank you so much, Julian. You are a gem, and we were so lucky to have you. Just to let everyone know, this interview, if you've missed any of it, do not worry. We will be publishing this interview as video on our Vimeo channel on Friday. It will also come out as an audio-only episode on Hatchcast, which you can get on any of your podcast streaming services. So, Julian, thank you so much again, and go green.
No, thank you again. I mean, just to Chris and Audrey, who's not there, and to you, Aaron. I mean, you've been a great full host, and you threw me good questions. And to the group, again, I encourage you to just keep pushing hard. And again, I'm around, and Chris and other folks know how to get a hold of me if I'm, if I can be helpful and other stuff. Happy to do it. And again, go green.
Go white.
Hello, and welcome to The Mindset. I'm your host, Desiree Melfi-Bozzo, and the Burgess Institute Student Success and Advising Manager at Michigan State University. Today, we are going to be talking about taking action and the skills of proactiveness, taking risks, and locus of control. We have all heard the brand slogans from Nike's Just Do It to Gatorade's Is It In You, and of course, Impossible's Nothing, courtesy of Adidas. All of these really successful brand slogans are tied together by one theme: taking action. They promote proactivity, empower risk-taking, and are all embedded in the belief that you can control the outcome of events in your life. Walk with me as we break down 3 of the most important skills of taking action. Let's begin with proactiveness. If proactiveness is making things happen and being a doer, its nemesis is definitely procrastination. So many times we get stopped before we even begin. As humans, we are expert level excuse makers, but making really great excuses for not being in action also happens to keep us living a really, really small life. Proactiveness is looking down the road, anticipating the roadblocks, the potholes, and the accidents up ahead. It's calculating the route before the detour sign comes out of nowhere. Mel Robbins invented a tool called the 5-second rule. If proactiveness is a skill you need to sharpen, I highly recommend mastering her tool. It will become game-changing in your efforts to live your best life. Pro tip alert: screenshot this slide so you can hit up Google later and learn more about Mel and her 5-second rule. We are now moving on to taking risks. For some of you listening to this, just me saying taking risks was enough to evoke sheer panic. As humans, we love the myths of safety and certainty. The reality is, when we take thoughtful, calculated risk, confidence builds, possibilities open, and unforeseen opportunities can be leveraged. Being successful in anything in life isn't handed out. To be successful, you have to actively pursue it. So weigh out the worst thing that's going to happen if you completely fall on your face and fail. Then, stare fear in the face and boldly take the first step. Which brings us to locus of control, the belief that you, not external forces, have control over the outcome of events in your life. There are 2 types of locus of control: internal and external. A healthy, strong internal locus of control is associated with confidence and optimism. If your locus of control is external and it finds you feeling helpless, I encourage you to start being in action. See, when you start identifying situations where you're able to make choices for yourself in your life, you end up gaining confidence and strengthening this muscle. The more you do this, the more you're going to build the muscle, and the more you build the muscle, the happier and more successful you're going to become. Proactiveness, taking risks, and locus of control are all skills that can be learned, sharpened, and used to push you to the head of the class. This is Desiree Melfi-Bozzo with The Mindset. Until next time, Spartans, what's your venture?
The Hatchcast is sponsored in part by Spartan Innovations. Spartan Innovations provides startups spinning out of MSU's ecosystem the commercialization, support, and financial resources necessary to turn MSU research technologies into successful Michigan businesses.
Hatchcast is an ongoing
Hatchcast is an ongoing collaboration
This podcast was co-created
By Aaron Richard, Tyler Mihai,
and Kurt Krieger.
It is produced by the Burgess Institute for Entrepreneurship and Innovation,
in cooperation with the MSU
Foundation.
Gabe Hales
And Justice Keach are our sound engineers and
editors. Our co-producers include Brandon Weaver,
Gabe Hales.
Justice Keach and Aaron Richard,
Original sound is created by Katya Gardina,
with help from Aubrey Haas,
Brandon Weaver,
Caitlin Setter,
Sydney Owinga,
Kurt Krieger, Tyler Mihai,
Gabriella Alum,
Jeff Smith,
Paul Jakes, Ken Smusiak.
Desiree
Neil
Melfi-Bozzo,
Kane,
and Lori Fisher.
If you have any questions or comments, please
Feel free to reach out at
Hatchcast@msu.edu.
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 Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.